Have you ever wondered why some people seem to understand your emotions perfectly? They know exactly what to say when you're hurting. They mirror your pain with such precision, it feels like they're reading your soul. They become your emotional sanctuary in a chaotic world. But then, slowly, you start to feel drained, used, like your deepest vulnerabilities have become weapons against you. What if I told you that person wasn't an empath at all? In 2020, researchers at Nottingham-Trent University made a disturbing discovery that shattered everything we thought we knew about empathy. Studying nearly 1,000 people, they identified a new psychological type that science had never recognized before. They called them Dark Empaths. And here's what will chill you to the bone. Dark Empaths made up 20% of their study. That's 1 in 5 people who seem empathetic, more than traditional psychopaths and narcissists combined. These aren't the cold, obvious predators we're taught to avoid. These are the ones who feel your pain, understand your story, and use that emotional intelligence not to heal you, but to control you. Carl Jung warned us about this shadow hiding behind compassion. He understood that the most dangerous people aren't those who lack empathy, they're those who weaponize it. The spiritual community has sold you a lie. They've told you that empathy is always pure, always healing, always a gift from the divine. But science reveals a darker truth. Today, I'm going to show you the groundbreaking research behind Dark Empaths, how Jung's actual theories explain this phenomenon, and why understanding this might be the most important psychological knowledge you ever gain. Because if you can't tell the difference between genuine empathy and emotional predation, you're not just vulnerable, you're a target. Let me tell you about the study that changed everything we thought we knew about human nature. Dr. Nadja Haim and her team at Nottingham-Trent University weren't looking for a new type of psychopath. They were trying to understand the relationship between empathy and what psychologists call the dark triad: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. For decades, we believed these were mutually exclusive. You were either empathetic and caring, or you were dark and manipulative, never both. But when they analyzed data from 9,191 participants, something unprecedented emerged from the statistical patterns. A fourth group appeared, one that scored high on both empathy and dark traits. They called them Dark Empaths, and the numbers were staggering. Dark Empaths comprised 19.3% of the population studied. Compare that to traditional dark triad individuals at only 13%, and regular empaths at 34%. This means that nearly 1 in 5 people walking among us possess the emotional intelligence to understand your deepest feelings, paired with the psychological darkness to exploit them. But here's what makes dark empaths uniquely dangerous. They don't fit our psychological profiles of predators. Traditional psychopaths show obvious red flags. They're cold, impulsive, aggressive. Dark empaths, however, scored lower on aggression than regular psychopaths. They show better well-being, less anxiety, higher social functioning. To the outside world, they appear as healthy, well-adjusted, deeply caring individuals. Dr. Haim's research revealed something that should terrify anyone who's ever trusted someone based on their apparent empathy. Dark empaths are better at hiding their darkness precisely because they understand emotions so well. They know that a slight furrow of the brow signals concern. They understand that a gentle touch at the right moment creates emotional dependency. They recognize that sharing a carefully chosen vulnerability will make you trust them completely. This isn't theory. This is peer-reviewed science published in the journal Personality and Individual Differences. But the research goes deeper. Dark empaths don't just understand emotions. They possess what psychologists call cognitive empathy at an advanced level. Let me explain the difference, because this is crucial to your psychological survival. There are 2 types of empathy that science recognizes: affective empathy, actually feeling what others feel, and cognitive empathy, understanding what others feel without the emotional involvement. Imagine watching someone cry. Affective empathy makes you feel sad, too. Cognitive empathy makes you understand they're sad, recognize why, and know exactly how to respond, but you don't absorb their pain. Dark empathies excel at cognitive empathy, while often lacking true affective empathy. They see your pain with crystal clarity, but they don't feel it. This emotional detachment allows them to manipulate your suffering without being hindered by guilt or genuine concern. Think about that person in your life who always knows the perfect thing to say during your worst moments, who seems to understand your trauma better than you do, who makes you feel seen in ways no one else can. Now ask yourself, do they actually seem emotionally affected by your pain, or do they simply respond to it perfectly? The dark empath's empathy is fractured. They possess the intellectual understanding of emotions without the moral guardrails that genuine empathy provides. Dr. Callie Estes, a cognitive behavioral therapist, describes their most common behaviors as based on sophisticated dishonesty. They may love bomb you, act amazing around your family, and appear the perfect partner, but inside, they only want you for your money or value you can give them. This is emotional intelligence weaponized against your psychological well-being. Now, let me tell you what Carl Jung actually discovered about human psychology. Not the distorted versions floating around social media, but his real scientific observations that explain how dark empaths are created. Jung didn't write about empaths as a distinct psychological type, but he did identify something far more relevant: the feeling function and how it can become corrupted in the human psyche. In 1921, Jung published Psychological Types, his masterwork that identified 4 psychological functions: thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition. Each could be expressed in either an extroverted or introverted attitude. The feeling function, which Jung associated with empathy, isn't about emotion as most people understand it. Jung defined it as the function that evaluates the personal and human significance of experience. It makes value judgments based on human well-being. Those with a dominant feeling function, Jung observed, have a greater natural capacity for empathy, which commonly manifests as moral concern, as well as a willingness to help and care for others. But here's where Jung's insights become crucial to understanding dark empaths. Jung discovered that when any psychological function becomes too dominant, it creates an equally extreme compensation in the unconscious mind. He called this the law of psychological compensation. If someone over-identifies with being caring and empathetic, their shadow, the rejected aspects of personality, becomes filled with the opposite qualities: cruelty, selfishness, emotional coldness. But Jung made another observation that explains the dark empathy phenomenon perfectly. He noted that some individuals could access both conscious and unconscious materials simultaneously. They could be empathetic and cruel, caring and manipulative, not because they were integrated, but because they were split. Jung wrote about what he called persona empathy, empathy performed for social advantage rather than genuine concern. This is empathy as a mask, worn to gain access to others' vulnerabilities. The dark empathy embodies this persona empathy perfectly. They've learned to perform the role of the caring, sensitive person so well that even they might believe it. But underneath, their true motivation remains self-serving. Jung also identified what he called the anima possession in men and animus possession in women, when someone becomes overly identified with their empathetic qualities while rejecting their assertive, boundary-setting aspects. This creates individuals who appear soft and caring on the surface, but possess a hidden hunger for power and control. They use their apparent vulnerability and sensitivity as tools to manipulate others' protective instincts. Consider Jung's description of the introverted feeling type. They prioritize personal emotions, making subjective emotional judgments regardless of external norms. In healthy development, this creates deep, authentic empathy. But when corrupted, it creates someone who uses emotional understanding for personal agenda. Jung observed that such individuals often become what he called emotional tyrants, people who control others through feelings rather than force. They create emotional dependency, manufacture crises to maintain attention, and use others' empathy against them. This is why Jung emphasized the crucial importance of shadow integration. He understood that refusing to acknowledge our capacity for selfishness, manipulation, and cruelty doesn't eliminate these traits. It drives them underground, where they operate unconsciously. The dark empath represents someone who has never done this shadow work. They built their identity around being caring and empathetic, while completely rejecting their darker impulses. Those impulses don't disappear. They find expression through their empathy itself. Jung wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." Dark empaths are terrifying precisely because they refuse this acceptance. They maintain their self-image as caring people while acting out their shadow through emotional manipulation. But Jung offered hope. He believed that consciousness could triumph over unconscious compulsion. The process he called individuation, becoming whole by integrating all aspects of personality, could transform even the most split psyche. For those who encounter dark empaths, Jung's teachings provide crucial protection. He taught that we must trust our instincts over others' personas. If something feels off about someone's empathy, if their care feels performative or controlling, Jung would say to trust that feeling. Your unconscious recognizes what your conscious mind might miss, the difference between genuine empathy and its shadow twin. Jung also emphasized that true empathy requires boundaries. Healthy empathy doesn't require you to sacrifice yourself for others' comfort. It doesn't demand that you become emotionally responsible for others' feelings. The dark empathy exploits the misconception that love means having no boundaries, that empathy means absorbing others' pain completely. But Jung understood that psychological health requires what he called differentiation, knowing where you end and others begin. Without this differentiation, empathy becomes a weapon that can be used against you. Now let's dive into what modern neuroscience reveals about empathy. Discoveries that Jung could never have imagined, but that validate his deepest insights about human psychology. In the past decade, neuroscientists have revolutionized our understanding of how empathy works in the brain, and their findings explain exactly why dark empaths are so dangerous. Dr. Tanya Singer's groundbreaking research at the Max Planck Institute revealed that empathy isn't one brain function. It's multiple neural networks that can operate independently. This is crucial to understanding dark empaths. The two primary empathy networks are the affective empathy network, centered in the anterior insula and anterior cingulate cortex. This network makes you actually feel others' emotions. When someone is in pain, these regions activate as if you're experiencing the pain yourself. The cognitive empathy network, located in the medial prefrontal cortex and temporal parietal junction. This network allows you to understand others' perspectives without emotional involvement. It's your theory of mind system. Here's the breakthrough. These networks can function independently. You can have high cognitive empathy with low affective empathy. Exactly what we see in dark empaths. Neuroscientist Dr. Marco Iacoboni's research on mirror neurons explains this further. Mirror neurons fire both when you perform an action and when you observe others performing that action. They're the biological basis of emotional mirroring. But here's what's terrifying. Mirror neurons respond to observed emotions, regardless of whether those emotions are genuine. A dark empath can activate your mirror neurons by performing empathy, displaying the facial expressions, vocal tones, and body language of genuine care. Your brain responds as if their empathy is real, creating the neurochemical basis for trust and emotional bonding. Meanwhile, their own mirror neurons allow them to perfectly mimic your emotional states without actually experiencing them. They become emotional chameleons, adapting their persona to trigger your specific attachment patterns. Recent research by Dr. Klaus Lamb at the University of Vienna identified another crucial brain region, the right supramarginal gyrus, RSMG. This area is responsible for maintaining the boundary between self and other. When the RSMG functions properly, you can understand others' emotions without losing yourself in them. When it's compromised, either through damage or manipulation, the boundaries dissolve. Dark empaths intuitively understand how to overwhelm your RSMG function. They flood you with emotional intensity, create crises that demand immediate empathetic response, and use trauma bonding to create neural dependency. Dr. Stephanie Cacioppo's research on social pain reveals why this works so effectively. The brain processes emotional rejection using the same neural pathways as physical pain. When a dark empath withdraws their apparent care through silent treatment, emotional coldness, or manufactured conflict, your brain experiences literal pain. This creates what neuroscientists call intermittent reinforcement, the most addictive learning schedule known to psychology. You become neurologically dependent on their empathy to avoid the pain of its withdrawal. But there's more. Dr. Patricia Churchland's research shows that empathy and oxytocin, the bonding hormone, can be manipulated. Oxytocin doesn't just create bonding, it creates in-group preference and out-group suspicion. Dark empathies exploit this by positioning themselves as your ultimate ally, while subtly encouraging you to distrust others. They become your sole source of emotional validation, creating neurochemical addiction to their presence. The most disturbing discovery comes from Dr. Kent Keogh's work with psychopaths using brain imaging. He found that psychopaths can turn on empathy when it serves their purposes. Their empathy networks aren't damaged. They're selectively activated. This explains how dark empathies can seem genuinely caring in public while being emotionally abusive in private. They're not lacking empathy, they're choosing when to deploy it. Recent studies by Dr. Jean Dissetti show that empathy without proper regulation can lead to emotional burnout, depression, and what he calls empathic distress. This is what happens to those who encounter dark empaths. Their empathy is weaponized against their own well-being. But neuroscience also reveals how to protect yourself. Dr. Judson Brewer's research on mindfulness shows that meditation strengthens the prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for emotional regulation and boundary maintenance. Dr. Antonio Damasio's work on interoception, awareness of internal bodily states, reveals that those with strong interoceptive awareness can better distinguish between their emotions and others. They're less susceptible to emotional manipulation. The key is understanding that empathy is a skill that can be regulated, not an overwhelming force you must surrender to. Your brain has the capacity to feel with others while maintaining your own emotional integrity. Dark empaths count on you not knowing this. They exploit the misconception that good people must absorb others' pain completely, but science reveals the truth. Healthy empathy has boundaries. Regulated empathy preserves your well-being while still allowing genuine connection. Now that you understand the science, let me show you exactly how dark empaths operate in real relationships. These aren't abstract psychological concepts. These are precise manipulation tactics disguised as empathy. Dark empaths begin with what appears to be extraordinary emotional attunement. They seem to understand you better than you understand yourself. This isn't accident, it's calculation. They use what psychologists call cold reading, combined with genuine cognitive empathy. They observe your micro-expressions, listen for emotional undertones, and mirror your energy with unsettling precision. But notice what they're actually doing. They're gathering emotional intelligence about you while revealing nothing genuine about themselves. Their vulnerabilities are strategic, designed to trigger your protective instincts and create false intimacy. Sarah, a 29-year-old therapist, described her experience. He seemed to see right through me, to understand my childhood trauma without me even sharing it. I thought I'd found my soulmate, only later that I realized he was studying me like a psychological case study. Once they've established their empathic credentials, dark empaths begin blurring emotional boundaries. They position themselves as your emotional twin, your perfect mirror, your missing half. They use phrases like, "I've never met anyone who understands me like you do. We're so connected. I can feel your emotions as if they're mine. I think we share the same soul." This creates what psychologists call emotional fusion. The dangerous belief that love means having no boundaries, that intimacy requires complete emotional moja. They encourage you to share your deepest traumas, your most shameful secrets, your greatest fears. not to heal you, but to acquire ammunition for future use. Dr. Mary Joy, a certified family mediator, warns, they can be very charming and put you on a pedestal, and then be the very person who will knock that pedestal down. Here's where their true nature emerges. Dark empaths begin using your empathy against you. They manufacture crises that require your immediate emotional support. They create dramas where they're always the victim and you're always the rescuer. They might say, "I'm having the worst day. I don't know what I'd do without you." Or, "Everyone else has abandoned me, but I know you truly care." Each crisis bonds you deeper into their emotional web. Your empathy becomes their drug, and they create situations to trigger larger doses. They also begin using your vulnerabilities as pressure points. If you shared that you fear abandonment, they threaten to leave during conflicts. If you revealed childhood abuse, they subtly recreate those dynamics. Dark empaths perfect a particularly insidious form of gaslighting. They use your empathy to make you doubt your own perceptions. When you notice their manipulative behavior, they respond with apparent hurt. "I can't believe you'd think that about me. After everything I've shared with you, how can you be so cruel?" They position your healthy skepticism as betrayal of their vulnerability. Your boundaries become attacks on their sensitivity. Your self-protection becomes evidence of your coldness. This is empathy weaponized against reality itself. Eventually, dark empaths lose interest or find new sources of empathetic supply. But they don't leave cleanly. They ensure maximum psychological damage. They might say, "I thought you were different, but you're just like everyone else." Or, "I opened my heart to you, and you destroyed it." They position themselves as the wounded empath, and you as the heartless abuser, completely inverting the reality of the relationship. Dark empaths aren't limited to romantic relationships. In professional settings, they become the colleague who always knows when you're struggling, the boss who seems deeply invested in your well-being, the employee who appears selflessly dedicated to the team. But watch carefully. Do they offer empathy that actually helps you, or empathy that makes you dependent on them? Do they create solutions, or do they create ongoing needs for their emotional support? Rachel, a marketing director, shared, "She was the office counselor, always there when anyone was stressed. But I noticed she was often the source of the stress she was helping with. She'd share concerning rumors, create artificial deadlines, then position herself as everyone's emotional support." Perhaps most devastating are dark empaths within families. They become the family member who's always concerned about everyone's well-being, who positions themselves as the emotional caretaker, the family therapist. But their empathy comes with strings. It creates obligation, guilt, and emotional debt. They use their apparent care to control family dynamics, to position themselves as indispensable, to ensure they remain the center of emotional attention. They often target the family's natural empaths, creating dynamics where the genuinely caring person feels responsible for the dark empath's emotional well-being. Social media has created new hunting grounds for dark empaths. They craft online personas of extraordinary sensitivity and emotional intelligence. They share inspiring content about empathy, healing, and authentic connection. But privately, they use these platforms to identify vulnerable targets, to gather personal information, and to create emotional dependency through carefully curated digital intimacy. They excel at what psychologists call parasocial empathy, creating the illusion of deep emotional connection with followers or online friends who feel seen and understood by their content. The pattern is always the same: apparent understanding, emotional enmeshment, empathy weaponization, and ultimate exploitation. The most dangerous part: dark empaths often convince themselves they're genuinely caring people. Their self-image as empaths protects them from recognizing their own manipulative behavior. They're not conscious villains, they're unconscious predators, who've learned to disguise their hunger for control as concern for others' well-being. Now comes the most crucial part: how to protect yourself from dark empaths and integrate these insights into your own psychological development. First, let's address the uncomfortable truth. We all have the capacity for empathic manipulation. Jung's shadow work demands that we acknowledge our own potential for using emotional intelligence as a weapon. Have you ever used someone's vulnerability against them during an argument? Have you ever manufactured a crisis to gain sympathy? Have you ever positioned yourself as more empathetic than others to gain social advantage? This isn't about shame, it's about consciousness. Only by owning your capacity for emotional manipulation can you develop immunity to others' manipulation. Real protection begins with understanding the difference between genuine and performed empathy. Science gives us specific markers. Genuine empathy characteristics includes appropriate boundaries, doesn't require you to sacrifice your well-being, encourages your independence, feels emotionally spacious, not suffocating, leads to mutual growth, or doesn't come with emotional debt. Whereas performed empathy characteristics includes creating emotional dependency, requires constant validation, feels overwhelming or consuming, comes with hidden expectations, leads to one-sided caregiving, creates guilt when withdrawn. Dr. Kristen Neff's research on self-compassion reveals a crucial insight. Healthy empathy begins with empathy for yourself. If someone's empathy requires you to abandon self-care, it's manipulation disguised as care. Remember the neuroscience research showing that interoceptive awareness, consciousness of your internal bodily states, protects against emotional manipulation? Practice this simple exercise. Throughout the day, pause and scan your body. Notice your breathing, heart rate, muscle tension, and gut sensations. This strengthens your ability to distinguish between your emotions and absorbed emotions from others. When someone claims to empathize with you, check your body. Does their presence create relaxation or tension? Does their empathy feel nourishing or draining? Your body knows the difference before your mind does. Train yourself to use cognitive empathy as protection. When someone appears to be empathizing with you, engage your analytical mind. What specifically are they offering? What do they seem to want in return? How do I feel during and after our interactions? Are they solving problems or creating dependency? Do they respect my boundaries or push against them? This isn't about becoming cynical, it's about becoming discerning. Since mirror neurons automatically activate in response to others' emotions, you need conscious regulation practices. The 30-second rule. When someone shares emotional content, wait 30 seconds before responding. This allows your prefrontal cortex to assess whether their emotion is genuine and whether absorbing it serves your well-being. The emotional reflection. Instead of automatically mirroring emotions, reflect them back. It sounds like you're feeling frustrated. This maintains empathic connection without emotional fusion. Dark empaths exploit empaths' reluctance to set boundaries. Practice these phrases. I can see you're in pain, and I'm not available to carry that for you. I understand your perspective, and I disagree. I care about you, and I won't sacrifice my well-being to prove it. Your emotions are valid, and they're yours to manage. Jung's individuation process offers the deepest protection against dark empaths. It requires acknowledging and integrating your own shadow material. Shadow inventory. Write honestly about times you've used empathy manipulatively. When have you played victim to gain sympathy? When have you used emotional intelligence to control outcomes? This isn't self-attack, it's self-knowledge. Persona analysis. Examine your empathic identity. Do you derive your self-worth from being the caring one? Do you feel superior to less empathetic people? True empathy doesn't require an empathic identity. Projection retrieval. Notice when you're drawn to help people who don't want help, when you're trying to heal people who enjoy their dysfunction. You might be projecting your own neediness onto others. Jung understood that we're not just healing individual shadows, we're confronting collective patterns. The empathy as weakness narrative that makes people susceptible to dark empaths is a collective shadow element. So is the empathy as superiority complex that creates dark empaths in the first place. Healing happens when we reclaim empathy as a conscious choice, rather than an unconscious compulsion or a spiritual identity. One of the most powerful protections against dark empaths is connection with genuine empaths. People who've done their shadow work and developed empathic discernment. These relationships feel different. They're nourishing rather than draining. They encourage your growth rather than your dependency. They include natural boundaries and mutual respect. Seek out relationships where empathy flows both ways, where your well-being matters as much as others, where your boundaries are respected as expressions of self-love rather than threats to connection. Integrate these insights into daily practice. Morning intention. Today, I choose conscious empathy over compulsive caregiving. Midday check-in. Am I maintaining my emotional boundaries? What energy am I absorbing that isn't mine? Evening reflection. Where did I give my power away today? How can I reclaim it tomorrow? This isn't about becoming less empathetic. It's about becoming more skillfully empathetic. Jung's promise holds true. As you integrate your shadow and develop discernment, you become immune to others' unconscious manipulation while maintaining your capacity for genuine love and connection. The goal isn't to eliminate empathy. It's to transform empathy from a vulnerability that can be exploited into a strength that can only be shared. We've journeyed through groundbreaking research that reveals an uncomfortable truth. Empathy, one of humanity's most beautiful capacities, can be corrupted into a weapon of psychological control. The 20% of people identified as dark empathies in that Nottingham Trent University study aren't going anywhere. They're in your workplace, your family, your friend group, your dating pool. Some may be reading this video's comments, learning how to better disguise their manipulation. But now you have something they can't take away from you: knowledge. You understand the difference between cognitive and affective empathy. You recognize that genuine empathy includes boundaries, that healthy care doesn't require self-sacrifice, that love doesn't mean losing yourself in others' emotional chaos. You've learned that your body's wisdom can detect performed empathy before your mind recognizes the deception, that your interoceptive awareness is your first line of defense against emotional manipulation. Most importantly, you understand that protecting yourself from dark empathies isn't about becoming less empathetic. It's about becoming more consciously empathetic. Carl Jung's deepest insight remains true. Only by integrating our shadows can we recognize shadow behavior in others. Only by acknowledging our own capacity for manipulation can we develop immunity to others' manipulation. This isn't the end of your empathic journey. It's the beginning of your empathic maturation. The world needs genuine empaths now more than ever. Not empaths who absorb the world's pain and call it healing. Not empaths who sacrifice themselves to prove their goodness. Not empaths who confuse emotional fusion with authentic connection. The world needs empaths who can feel deeply while maintaining their boundaries, who can love fully while preserving their well-being, who can offer care without creating dependency. Empaths who understand that their sensitivity is not a weakness to be exploited, but a strength to be protected and consciously shared. If this video has opened your eyes to patterns in your own relationships, if you're recognizing behaviors you've experienced, or perhaps exhibited yourself, remember this: awareness is the first step toward transformation. The dark empath depends on your unconsciousness. They count on your inability to distinguish between genuine and performed empathy. They exploit your belief that good people don't question others' motives. But now you know better, and knowledge, as Jung understood, is the light that dissolves shadow. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Comment below about your own experiences with performed versus genuine empathy. Your story might be the mirror someone else needs to recognize their situation. And if you're ready to dive deeper into the intersection of psychology, neuroscience, and spiritual development, if you want to continue learning how to protect your empathic gifts while developing true emotional mastery, subscribe and join our community of conscious empaths. Because the future doesn't need more people who mistake emotional dysfunction for spiritual gifts. It needs people who understand that true empathy is a conscious choice, a developed skill, and a protected treasure. You are not responsible for healing the world's pain. You are responsible for maintaining your own wholeness while offering your authentic care to those who can receive it without exploiting it. That's not selfishness. That's wisdom. That's not coldness. That's conscious empathy. And that's exactly what the world needs from you. The Dark Empath's power comes from your unconsciousness. Your power comes from your awakened discernment. Choose wisely. Choose consciously. Choose with full knowledge of what empathy really is and what it isn't. Your future self, and everyone you'll authentically help along the way, will thank you for it. But here's what even conscious empaths struggle with. Jung discovered an even more dangerous psychological trap that dissolves your sense of self so completely you literally forget who you are. Click the video appearing on the screen to discover why Jung called participation mystique the empath's deepest curse and the breaking point that transforms victims into psychological sovereigns.